Welcome to the Living Well Church podcast, and thanks for tuning in today. Our mission as a church is to help people find faith in Jesus and a life of purpose and hope. You're about to watch a message that will challenge you, inspire you, encourage you, and most of all, point you to Jesus and the life of purpose and hope He has planned for you. So lean in and enjoy, and let God speak into your life.
You know, I'm speaking this morning on the Church of Philadelphia, and God's already been speaking this morning, and I think this message is really for today. And I'm going to start by saying that my family and I were really blessed with some land and some horses, and it's a really great and wonderful space. And my mum jokes with people that come. Well, she doesn't joke. I think she means it seriously, but to me it sounds like a joke. That one day we'll get our deck chairs out at the horses, and we will sit on those deck chairs and have cocktails. Now, 17 years we've had this land and the horses. I've never even sat down, I don't think, let alone had a cocktail and sat down. And that happens because every day, it seems, I'm not there every day, my mum is, there's something else. You know, every day there's a fence down that's got to mend. Every day a horse's rug needs stitching up. Every day one of the horses escaped. The next day the horse has got colic. The next day another fence needs, is down, needs to be mended. The next day the roof of the barn's blown off, it's got to be put back on. The next day another fence has to be mended. And there's this general cycle and this consistent pull of other things that need to be doing that stops us from sitting down and having those cocktails. And it was similar when I went into church leadership here. I entered the church at a bit of a crazy time, and it was at a time where Dave and Laura, those of you who know them, felt called to another church in Ashford. Jez was being called to Dill Church, and the leadership team was somewhat depleting. And I remember saying to Marcus, it would be good, when we get to that settled spot, And Marcus gave me that wry little smile that he has and said, let me tell you one thing about church leadership. It's like a stack of cards. If you build a pyramid with cards and you're constantly trying to protect it from blowing over, you're constantly trying to protect it from collapsing, and you constantly feel that it's going to, that another thing and it's all going to break, another thing it's all going to collapse. And it's like that with the horses. You just think, we're trying to just keep it all together and stop it from falling apart. And some of you, maybe that's how you kind of feel in life. That actually you go through life and you're constantly trying to stop it from collapsing, trying to stop it from falling to pieces. And every day it's almost like there's a new thing that comes in and you're just trying to hold it all together. And that's very much the state of Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a city in Asia Minor, and it's 28 miles from Sardis, the church you heard about last week. And it's a town where it's built on it's a volcanic area, and it's got an earthquake line running through it. Now, because of that, the land is really fertile. So they have lots, because they're actually quite prosperous because the land is so fertile. They're known worldwide at the time that the letter was written for their wines. Also, people come and journey to Philadelphia to kind of bathe in their hot springs, believing that they're medicinal. And yet, because it's volcanic, because it's on that earthquake line, the people who live there are consistently wondering, when's this all going to cave in? When's our prosperous town just all going to collapse? When is this going to fold literally beneath our feet? And in 17 AD, it does. In 17 AD, they experience an earthquake which completely ruins the city. And it doesn't just ruin Philadelphia, it ruins these 10 other towns around it, including Sardis, which is 28 miles away. And the ruins are so bad that a Roman emperor, Tiberius, comes and helps to rebuild it. The town is so grateful that they actually rename the town after him for a short time. However, once they've rebuilt it, it's very, very real for the people living there that the ground where their home is very shaky. The ground where their home is extremely turbulent. That everything they've built could literally fall apart in seconds. And you know, I felt when preparing this, God was saying to me, there are people here that feel that about very particular areas of their lives. That you've kind of built your home, but it's on shaky ground, and you're wondering any second, when's this going to just all cave in, Lord? When's it going to collapse? When's my marriage that I'm trying to hold together, when's that just going to cave and give way? How about my family with my teenagers? I'm trying to walk around on eggshells with them. The ground's so shaky and so turbulent, when's that going to just give way? Maybe at work, and you feel like you're only just about managing. Every day you're just about coping. And you're thinking, God, when is this going to completely cave in and give way? Maybe it's actually you're suffering yourself, either with mourning or grief or sickness. And you're desperately trying to keep up every day. And you're wondering, do you know what? I'm just wondering when I'm going to completely cave. I'm wondering when it's going to completely give way. And to add to that, for the Christians in Philadelphia, they're also having a really tough time. Because Philadelphia is a town where there's Greek gods is kind of the predominant god that's worshipped there. And additionally, there's kind of the Jews and the Christians living there. And quite a few Jews have converted from Judaism to become Christian. And the people that were Jews and that are now Christian Jews are facing hardship and persecution from those that are Jewish. Those that they kind of thought they knew, that they grew up with, that they thought they had something in common with, are actually pulling them in a different direction as they try desperately to follow Christ's message. And I felt this morning there's some of you that are in those situations. You're trying to keep it together. You're trying to hold it together. You know the ground beneath you is shaky. And there's actually people who you thought you once knew, you thought you once had something in common with, actually pulling on you and making that situation even harder for you. And even maybe in church ministries, maybe even in worship, maybe even in children's things that you run. Maybe in areas of the church, you're trying desperately to follow God's way for your life. And there's others that you thought you had something in common with, but they're trying to pull you in a different direction. You know, into this situation, into your situation, into the people of Philadelphia, God then through a letter writes this. And it's in Revelation 3, verse 7. It says, "To the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. I know your deeds. See, I've placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know that you have little strength, yet you have kept my word and not denied my name. I will make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews though they are not, but are liars, I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. Since you have kept my command to endure patiently, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of earth. I'm coming soon. Hold on to what you have so that no one will take your crown. The one who conquers, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will they leave it. I will write on them the name of my God and the name of the city of my God and the New Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God. And I will also write on them my new name. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches." Now, the first thing I want to look at is the beginning of the letter is so different to the beginnings of the other letters. For the beginnings of the other letters relay back to chapter 1. So there's an image in chapter 1, someone with 7 stars, someone with bronze, like this really creative image. And yet, this is the letter, and it starts differently. It says very simply in verse 7, "These are the words of one who is holy and true, who holds the key of David." And I think this morning, the people of Philadelphia needed to know that the person who is speaking into the situation is holy and true. It's completely pure. It's completely perfect. It's completely holy. And it's true, he can't lie. There's no murky water with what Jesus says. There's no middle ground. There's no half-truths. It is just true. And those of you in shaky situations this morning, you're feeling like you're just trying to hold it together. People are pulling you in different directions. Jesus comes, and what he says to you this morning is holy and true. It's perfect, and it is truth. And when you're wandering in this world where there's so many different people giving you different pieces of advice, and you're wondering what's not true and what is true, this is truth. Additionally to that, he says, who holds the key of David. Now, the original source of this can be found in Isaiah 22. And I'm just going to flick to it quickly. And it's a messianic prophecy. Originally, it relates to Eliakim, who is like a treasurer. However, it comes in bigger fulfillment with Jesus. And it says this in verse 22. It says, I will place on his shoulder the key to the house of David. What he opens, no one can shut. And what he shuts, no one can open. I will drive him like a peg into a firm place. He will become a seat of honor for the house of his father. All the glories of his family will hang on him, its offspring and offshoots, all its lesser vessels, from the bowls to the jars. And I want to pick up two things. That he's got this key. And it aligns itself again with Isaiah 9, because this key is on his shoulder. And in Isaiah 9, it says about Jesus, a prophecy about Jesus, that the government is going to be on his shoulder. And so this key here, the one who is holy, the one who is true, also has the key to the government, to his kingdom. So the one who is speaking this morning, the one who spoke to the people of Philadelphia in their time, it's not just holy, not just true, but he's the one that holds the kingdom. He's the one who also has judgment, who says can come in and come out of the kingdom. That's pretty mind-blowing, isn't it? That he would then speak to you. But also in verse 23, it describes him like a peg in a firm place. And the word peg here, what it means is in the time, if you imagine two big wooden rafters and had those huge nails that went through the rafters and joined them together. So it was like the peg that holds the house together. It's so firm, it's so consistent, it's so strong. And God says this morning, he speaks into your situation and he reminds us he's the one with the key of David. And he is this peg. He is so strong. He is so consistent. He never changes. In your turbulent times, when you're thinking, how can I stop things from collapsing? Hang on him. Hang on him. He won't collapse. And it then goes on in Revelation 3 to say what Jesus will do. And you know, when looking at this letter, there is so much that I can go into. There's so much symbolism connected to the end times, connected to the Old Testament. There is it's littered, this passage, with so much. And I have to be honest with you, and I hope you grant me a little bit of grace this morning, that I don't have time to just go into absolutely everything. And so I'm literally looking at key messages that I can pull out of this. But if you're interested, I really beg you to go and investigate this letter. It is mind-blowing how it kind of stitches together Old Testament symbolism with end-time symbolism. It's phenomenal. But for now, I just want to go into where it says, verse 9, it says, I will make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews, though they are not, that become liars. I'll make them come and fall at your feet and acknowledge that I've loved you. You know, it's very simple. We sang a song at a Blaze. It kind of became our theme for the week of Youth Ablaze. And it was about Jesus being the lamb and Jesus being the lion. And this phenomenal line which says he roars with power and he fights your battles. He roars with power and he fights your battles. And to these people in Philadelphia, God is just reminding them, I know you're trying to hold it all together. I know you're tired. You have little strength. I know you're trying to stop everything from collapsing. I know people are persecuting you. You've got hardships. But just remember, I know that too. I know those who are against you. And I will deal with them. And so often we think, Lord, what should I do about that person? What should I do about them? And God comes and he just reminds us, I'm fighting your battles. It reminds me of Joshua 6, where there's the walls of Jericho. And the people to take Jericho, the Israelites didn't have to do anything, really. They just had to walk around Jericho 7 times and do a bit of shouting. That's all they had to do. And God gave them the city. They didn't have to smack down the walls with their hammers. They didn't have to picket it for days. They didn't have to lift a sword. God did it. This is a reminder this morning. God is fighting your battles. You don't need to. You're worrying about what should you do about so-and-so. What should you say to so-and-so? You don't need to. He's got it in his hands. He reminds the people of Philadelphia that. And when I was reading this and I was thinking, Lord, it's not just about, he doesn't just speak about what he will do here, but we need to be reminded about what he has done. Because I think really powerfully what comes through this letter, what comes through this passage, is this kind of comfort and this encouragement of understanding where the people are at, the way that they've just suffered, the way that they've just got through, the way that they've had to just face kind of hardship every day. God comes and says, do you know what? I'll deal with those people. We can trust him because he's the Holy One, he's the true one, he's got the key. But more than that, and I don't mean this line in a flippant way, and please don't take it like that. I mean it in a really serious way. We know that we can hang on in there. We know that we can hang on in there with Jesus Christ. And this letter doesn't promise us that our times are going to get better on this earth. It doesn't say that. It doesn't promise us that we're going to be standing on secure ground. It doesn't say that. But it does say, I know you have little strength. Hold fast. And I think the word this morning is just hang on in there. And the reason why I say it is because I know that Jesus Christ literally and physically hung on in there. And I cannot fathom, and this really gets me about Jesus' life, is he grew up knowing what was going to happen to him. If we turn to Isaiah 53, Jesus would have known as he was growing up that this was already his testimony. It says, he grew up before him like a tender shoot and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering, familiar with pain. Like one from whom people hide their faces, he was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all like sheep have gone astray. Each one of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. Imagine growing up knowing that's what's on my life. 30 years of that. 30 years of walking, wondering, when is this going to completely collapse under my feet? Of walking around, this ground I walk on is shaky because one day I'm going to be pierced for their transgressions. One day I'm going to be bruised. One day I'm going to be spat at. One day I'm going to be hung on a cross. Man, I can't imagine the constant dread and anticipation. He knows completely what it is like to constantly be in dread of utter collapse. He knows what it is like to literally and physically hang on in there. And some of you need to know this morning that Jesus is just saying, I know. Like, I know. I know things are on the brink of collapse. But hold fast. You know, what gets me even more is that Jesus, I'll just share this a little bit because it made me kind of like smile a little bit almost. In his first miracle that he performs where he turns water into wine, his mother Mary knows the situation of this wedding, and then she knows that they've run out of wine. And she kind of says to Jesus, oh, Jesus, they've run out of wine. And he turns and says, my hour has not yet come. You know, my hour where the ground gets shaky, where things get really concerning, that hasn't come yet. But you know what? He does that anyway, just so people can have wine at a wedding. He enters a very turbulent situation. He enters the countdown to the end of his life just to give people wine at a wedding. You know, and into that, it just kind of blows my mind about what Jesus is going to do for you. Because just before he died, he was in the garden and he prays, Lord, take this cup from me. Take this cup from me. You know, we need to remember Jesus is half human. He's also half God. He's God and man together. And we see that kind of real humanity side of him. Like, take this cup from me. Lord, is there any other way that this can be prevented? Is there any other way that I cannot be on the cross? And maybe this morning in your situation, in the turbulent times, the people from Philadelphia, I wonder how many times they said, can there be some other way? Like, can you take this cup from us? And we see in the Bible, people literally put his cup and ran away from it. We also see kind of David consistently cry out to the Lord, asking him to, don't worry, Sarah, it's okay. Just thought I'd point that out for her. It's recorded and everything. It's on YouTube now. Sarah was sat there thinking, take this flipping phone from me, Lord. Yeah. But on a serious note, where are you? In your marriage, are you thinking, Lord, take this marriage from me? With your children, are you thinking, take this child from me? With your job, are you thinking, Lord, take this job from me? In your ministry in church, Lord, take that from me. Because Jesus himself got to that point. And then he said those beautiful words straight after, but not my will, but yours be done. And amen that he said those words. And this morning, there's just the challenge. In our hardship, in our turbulent times, can we just say, Lord, not my will, but yours be done? Not my will, but yours be done. And you know, there are people here that have testimonies of saying that line, and of testimonies of knowing what God promises. Because as we know, God just didn't hang on the cross. He didn't stay hanging on the cross. And actually, he never made us to be people who just hung on in there. He didn't make us for that. He also didn't make us for people who would just sit on deck chairs drinking cocktails. That was never his plan. In Revelation 3, he reminds the Philadelphians. He says, to the one who conquers, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Jesus conquered. He conquered death. He conquered all our sin. He conquered hell. He conquered. And just like him, when we know we've got to hang on in there, we're reminded that to the one who conquers, he'll give us a pillar in the temple of his God. Do you know what it says in the Bible? It says we are made to be more than conquerors. And there's some people here, and I'm so grateful for the times that they hung on in there. And now they can say, yeah, and we conquered that. I'm grateful for the people that hung on in there with their marriages, and now said, yeah, and through God we conquered that. Who hung on in there with their families, and through God they can say, we conquered that. Who hung on in there through illness. And you know what? I'm waiting for my mum to be healed of ME. And I'm waiting for the time where I can say, Lord, you conquered that. That might not happen until she enters heaven. But even so, I look at her now, completely different from when she first had ME and she was kind of completely in bed all the time. And I know that God is conquering that. Yeah, I can see that. Mum's not just hanging on in there anymore. Things aren't about to collapse and fall down any second. God is conquering in that. And whatever your situation, you need to know that you weren't made to be somebody who just hung on in there. You weren't made to just be somebody that kept everything from collapse all the time. You were meant to be a conqueror. And the significance of a pillar for the Philadelphia people is huge. At the time in the temples, there would be these huge pillars, and the emperors would have their names written on them. And so for Jesus to come and say, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God, it's like saying, do you know what? You are just so worthy of that. Because you've just hung on in there, because of your little strength, but you've not denied my name, because you've kept my word, because through this turbulent time you've gone, Jesus, I'm just still trying to follow you. He's saying you're going to have this pillar. And emperors' names aren't going to be written on there. Kings' names aren't going to be written on there. Warriors' names aren't going to be written on there. Do you know what? That pillar is you. And I will write on them the name of my God, the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem. What an absolute honor to have that. And that's the promise of God for those that endure. Just endure patiently. And then lastly this morning, I hope this is kind of an encouraging message. I said before I started, I find encouraging messages hard. I'm not the most encouraging person, and God's kind of pulled me up a little bit on that. So I'm hoping you feel like, actually, in your situation, you feel a bit more encouraged this morning. But there is a final thing. Philadelphia literally means brotherly love. And again, there's whole other connotations that you can go and you can look into that. But the essence of it means brotherly love. This letter isn't to Lucy. This letter isn't addressed to Marcus. This letter isn't addressed to Noel. It's addressed to Philadelphia. It's addressed to the place. It's addressed to the people. And you know, we as a church, we are a body. We are a people. And when they rebuilt the city, they rebuilt it together. Yes, they had the help of Tiberius who came. But we need to start to be a little bit more honest with each other when we know we have really little strength. And living well as a church, I think on the whole does that quite well. But sometimes we need to be a little bit more honest in the times where we really can't hold it together. Because we have the beauty of one another. We have the beauty of showing brotherly love. We have the beauty of coming alongside each other and saying, come on, just hang on in there. You're not someone to hang, you're going to be a conqueror. And so that's the first thing for us. Let's just get a little bit more alongside each other. But also Philadelphia was a really strategic town. So strategic that the Greeks used it to kind of send out people into the neighboring countries, because it was a border town. It bordered 3 other countries to kind of spread the Greek culture. They were so successful in doing so that one of the neighboring countries adopted so much Greek culture that they forgot completely their own language. And there is this parallel with Dover here. I can't get away from that. Dover is a border town. It is one where people enter and exit the country. And there is something that Dover, I look at Dover, and it is very much a hang on in their town. It is, isn't it? Like you walk around the streets and you think, yep, that little shop's just hanging on in there. And you walk around and you think, yep, that church is definitely just hanging on in there. And you see people, and it's written on their faces. They are hanging on in there with life. Dover reeks of just hanging on in there-ers. That's a made-up word for you, Katie, there. But it does. And I just get this sense, and there's prophecies that have come through Burn that we've had in the leadership team that actually God's saying, do you know what? Dover, you're meant to be a conquering town. Dover, you're meant to be a conquering town. Dover, you're meant to be a conquering town. You're not meant to be a hanger-on in their town. And yet, if the church, if we can't be conquerors, if we can't grasp God's promises, what hope is there for Dover? And Whitfield itself, I think, is very strategically placed. It is literally a thoroughfare to Canterbury, to Thanet, to Dover, to the port. We need to start by making sure that Whitfield is a conquering town. And we need to do that in brotherly love, supporting one another, and making sure that we are that we know that God is conquering in our lives. If the church can't start by doing it, there's no hope for Whitfield and Dover. And so very simply this morning, God comes and he goes, I know you're tired. I know you have little strength. I know what you've tried to be fighting. But he reminds us that he fights our battles. He reminds us that we're not made to just hang on in there, but we're made to be conquerors. And then he challenges us with how are we going to spread his kingdom out to the places that are surrounding us, to those people who are just desperately trying to stop the earth from giving way beneath their feet. How do we come aside them and show them the one who is holy, the one who is true, and the one that has the key to the kingdom? And so that's why I want to finish this morning, but I first want to just invite people, if this is okay. I don't know how it's going to happen, whether we have a bit more worship, if that's okay. Just for some prayer, because I really felt this morning there are people that know exactly what it's like to live on a volcanic land, metaphorically. You're walking, you feel that the earth is shaking, and God really wants to remind you this morning. He wants to remind you you are a conqueror, and he wants to remind you that he comforts, and that you need to hold on to him who is the peg that is secure and consistent. So if that's you, I'd love to pray for you. I know others would love to pray for you. If not, please spend some time with Jesus this week, just to remind yourself of who he is